Every year we say that this draft matters, and most years someone will come out and say that this class is going to change things. And most of the time they're right. Teams will pick players up, some will hit, some won't. And at the end of the day, the league pretty much looks the same in September as it did in April. But there's something about this year's draft that feels like that maybe some organisations have bought themselves 5 years of direction. But then on the other hand, there are teams that I feel like had a real chance to show themselves and what direction their organisation is heading, and they simply didn't do that. There are players that we will be talking about in both directions, whether they are going to be a future Hall of Famer or they're going to be a bust. So that's what today's episode is about. It's not just a recap, it's a verdict. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Sunday Standard!
Alrighty gang, welcome back to the Sunday Standard. My name is Anders. This is episode 9. Let's get straight into it with the winners of the draft. And we've really got to start there in Cleveland, which is a strange organisation to be claiming was a winner for once. But fortunately for them, they may have now finally turned a corner and have got maybe a little bit of direction of where they see themselves long term. Still, obviously, a concern with who they're going to take forward as their quarterback. Now, late in the draft, they've gone and also grabbed Taylor Green. So now you've got a quarterback room of Deshaun Watson in his final year of that ridiculous contract that you gave him. You've also got, obviously, Shedeur. You've also got Dylan Gabriel. So 4 quarterbacks. What direction are you heading? I think there's still a little bit of confusion there. Who starts? I think it's more than likely going to be Shedeur. I think he does get the job, but it all, I guess, comes down to sort of where they stand with Deshaun. Obviously, he won't be there past this year, but do they give him one last run and maybe he tries to fight his way on in his career? I mean, look, he's made a bag of money there in Cleveland and can ride off into the sunset with, I guess, a tarnished legacy for probably all the wrong reasons, but at the end of the day, he never has to work another day in his life, so take that how you will. But look, let's get into the episode with, I guess, a rundown of how the Cleveland Browns won in this draft, because I certainly think they did. Now, we sort of go back to last year with the whole Jacksonville and Travis Hunter trade. So from that trade, the Browns initially had pick 2, and obviously Jacksonville were pretty set on grabbing Travis Hunter. So the Browns traded down to 5 and also got picks 36, 126, and this year's first rounders. So from that, they've got Mason Graham, a defensive tackle, there last year with pick 5 that they traded down. They picked up Quinshon Judkins, who I think was a great pickup and one of the shining lights of a pretty dire Browns season last year. And they also grabbed Dylan Sampson. And then they obviously also got Jacksonville's first round this year, which they have now used on KC Concepcion. So that trade is now complete from the Travis Hunter deal. And they've really filled a certain need, weapons for whoever is going to be the wide receiver, whoever's going to be the quarterback there in Cleveland. So that's tick number 1. Moving on to the offensive line, obviously really struggled last year, 14 different rotations, and all 5 starters off that list are now gone. So Cam Robinson, who they brought in mid-season from the Texans on a 1-year deal, he's gone. Joel Bitonio, the 12-year Browns veteran, he retired. Ethan Pocic, who has been there for the last couple of years, his contract expired and no longer returning. Wyatt Teller has gone to Houston. Jack Conklin, obviously pretty injury-riddled career there as your right tackle, has been moved on as well. So that's a major starting point for the Browns. Now, they did a lot of work in free agency, brought in Titus Howard from the Texans, Zion Johnson from the Chargers, and you've also brought in Jenkins from the Packers on a 2-year deal. They needed a true left tackle, and they got Spencer Fano So moving down from pick 6 from KC, who moved up to obviously grab their guy in Mansour Delane, the cornerback there from LSU. And they got back 9. So the Browns got back picks 9, 74, 148. Now, Spencer Fano is a day one starter there in Cleveland, no doubt. Monken has come out and said that. That's what he's going to aim for Fano to be. And I certainly think the skill set is there. He was one of the best tackles in this draft. Now, obviously, you need to score points. Last year, you kind of just didn't. You were dead last in receptions, bottom in the yards, and second last in touchdowns with 16. Only the Jets and the Titans were worse in comparison with 15. So they've already ticked off one box there, getting Casey Concepcion with the 24th pick, and I think that's the right pick. And then they've gone and got, on day 2, a guy like Denzel Boston, the Washington wide receiver, who, again, is another weapon, and they've really built out their wide receiver room. They've also got an absolute steal, day 2, with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren out of Toledo, the safety, and probably the second best safety in the draft, behind, obviously, Caleb Downs. It's good to see the Cleveland Browns actually have and actually to win out in this draft, which I seriously think they did. So good work there, Cleveland. Moving on to, obviously, another major winner of this draft. And that's going without saying. When you've got the number 1 pick, you have to make the right choice. And the right choice has always been Fernando for the Raiders. Continuing on for the draft, if you only hit with a quarterback, then there's obviously other holes in this team that need to be filled. And obviously that all started with free agency for the Raiders. Now, bringing in Tyler Linderbaum was the first piece of the puzzle that needed to be filled. You bring in a vet center that is going to control your line of scrimmage and settle Fernando when he needs it the most, when he's sort of learning the game and helping bring this franchise back to greatness, then starting with a centerpiece on that offensive line like Linderbaum, like everyone else has talked about, was the smartest decision there by the Vegas Raiders to start off with. Following on from that, bringing in a guy like Kirk Cousins. Now, I've spoken about this on numerous episodes. Bringing in a vet like Kirk Cousins allows 2 things. It allows growth for Fernando. Okay, look, you've also got Tom Brady in the ownership group, so you're going to get incredible amount of knowledge from him, but he's not playing. So you also need to be able to have someone that's in the trenches from day dot to help you grow and learn and develop and understand the pace of the game. So bringing in a guy like Kirk Cousins was a great decision there. But then also, like I've said last episode, if you bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins, it gives you that ability to, look, just for example, say we're week 14 and he gets a little niggle and you're sort of on the precipice of, certainly we hope, a better season, and he gets slightly injured, you just sit him. Put him on ice and you've got Kirk to go for the rest of the season. So hopefully, again, make sure that you're not just throwing the season away at that point, where you actually can look to the future. You're probably going to get another pretty early draft pick next year. So the better you go from there. You brought in Nakobe Dean and Key Walker in your linebacker positions as well. So it's all well and good to build out an offense to allow Fernando to step in day 1 and feel comfortable, but then you also need to improve on the other side of the ball, which they have done. And like I said, it's all well and good to go and grab a guy like Fernando at pick 1. He was always he's hopefully the answer there for you at quarterbacks, considering you've had 5 different starters in the last 2 years. But you then need to go out and grab other players and other pieces to continue helping with this rebuild. So they've gone and got Tredain Stukes, the safety out of Arizona at 38. Mike Washington, the running back out of Arkansas, who is a really good pickup and really, I think, will help the Raiders. And Mike Washington there at pick, he's a player that I think will work really well with Ashton Genty. He's just got that superior pace that once he gets to the outside, he can just blitz people. Whereas Ashton Genty sort of reminds me of a Le'Veon Bell kind of player, where he's more, I guess, strategic and runs not at a flat out pace, but he's more calculated in how he does things. So I think that's a good balance between the two. And then the pick that I feel can go one of two ways, and that is Jermod McCoy, the cornerback out of Tennessee. Now, look, the knee is a real concern for everyone, and that's why he did slip as far as he did. All well and good for him to come out and say that his doctors have said his knee's fine, and that he's willing to do whatever is required and whatever the Raiders require, if that is another surgery, and he's then now misses the entire year. That's all well and good, but there's obviously always going to be a concern there. And that's, again, a major reason as to why no one was willing to take a shot with a sort of a first or a second round pick, because then you're potentially giving up those kind of picks for a player that you may only get 1 or 2 years out of. So again, very calculated, and everything sort of comes back to obviously Mendoza and the future of your franchise, but they seem to be looking to have finally made a step in the right direction. It was really good to see from Las Vegas. They've got a bit of an identity building there now, which is really good to see. And then let's move on to the other two winners. We'll sort of just breeze through these ones, but it's both the New York teams. The Giants and the Jets, I think, were, again, two of the major winners in this draft. So let's start with the Giants. Now, look, they've been 7-27 over the last 2 years there in New York at the G-Men, and obviously this is John Harbaugh's first draft. So you've brought in a left tackle and a right tackle in the free agency. You've also signed Isaiah Likely from the Ravens, coming over there from Baltimore with Harbaugh. You've brought in Darnell Mooney from the Falcons, which I really like. Obviously replacing Wan'Dale Robinson. Picked up Patrick Ricard as a fullback, which, again, from the Ravens, smash mouth football kind of sort of identity that New York really need. Obviously, you've moved Sexy Dexy, Dexter Lawrence, over to the Bengals and picked up then the number 10 pick. So you've got some serious capital in that first round. 5-10, like I said last week, franchise changing direction in this pick. Now, look, was taking Arvell Reese the right decision there at 5. Obviously, everyone sort of expected him to go anywhere between 2 and 4, or 2 and 3, really. So when you've got players like Burns, Abdul, Carter, Thibodeau, do you take an elite edge player like Arvell? He's not really needed, but he can also play sort of inside linebacker as well. So, look, it'll wait to see. And then obviously you've gone and grabbed Francis Marianoa from Miami. He allowed 1 sack in 200 pass sets in 2025, and some are comparing him to Penei Sewell. Pretty good comparison there for Francis Marianoa. Also gone and grabbed Colton Hood, the other cornerback from Tennessee. You've gone and grabbed Malachi Fields, the wide receiver there from Notre Dame, and certainly, again, build out that organisation to something that we can certainly hope to see some growth there. Jackson Dart, second season. Let's see where they go there for the G-Men. And then, obviously, the other New York team, the New York Jets, 0 interceptions in 2025. Let's preface that as being the biggest concerning factor there for the Jets. Key free agency moves. You brought in Minka Fitzpatrick on a 3-year deal, and he's not only your immediate starting safety, but he's probably one of your immediate captains of the team and sort of just a veteran presence there on the defensive side of the ball. Geno Smith, you know how I feel about that situation, so we'll move on. Joseph Asai, the edge there from the Bengals. Jets have also signed Demario Davis, the linebacker from the Saints. Again, another major factor in this Jets growth period here from the draft is obviously them moving off Sauce Gardner last year. You got the Colts 2026 and 2027 first round picks, and you got Adonai Mitchell. And with that first round pick, you've gone and grabbed Kenyon Sadiq, who I think is a perfect fit. He is going to be an elite tight end. I think, obviously, Jets are aiming towards next year's draft to pick up their, hopefully, finally, after so many missed opportunities, their franchise quarterback. So I think getting a guy like Sadiq this year, getting reps, and then hopefully come 2028, once their quarterback for next year has had a year behind centre, we can see it sort of pay off for them there. And then obviously David Bailey at number 2. Now, one of the more interesting picks of the draft, kind of like I said when I was talking about them taking Caleb Downs, I think the Jets were going to do whatever the Jets wanted to do. Obviously, they had cancelled the meeting with David Bailey, so ultimately they had already made up their mind that they were going to go and grab him and use their meets with other players to sort of see where they go from there. So David Bailey, again, he's a really good player. Nothing to take away from David Bailey. He led the country in sacks last year with 14.5, but his ceiling is a little bit lower than Arvell Reese, and he's 2 years older than Arvell. So again, the youth sort of side on Arvell's side. Interesting pick, but I think it'll pay off for them. I think David Bailey's going to be a stud. And then you've obviously also moved up again into the first round and grabbed a guy like Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, who was Mendoza's number 1 target there. Obviously national championship teammate. You've gone and grabbed another Indiana player in D'Angelo Pons as well, the cornerback. Now, obviously, you're concerned about his size, only about 5'9", so, but again, 7 interceptions, 27 pass breakups at the college level. I think he's a really good signing there at 50. Now, with winners of the draft, there's always going to be teams that don't improve as much as they should have, could have. Now, we're not going to call them losers of the draft because at the end of the day, everyone's mildly improving. They hope to, but they're not. I don't want to call them losers. So let's call them non-improvers. So starting off, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, they've finally seen what Trevor Lawrence brings to the table, and it's starting to click there in Florida. So the concern is, obviously, they had no first round pick there. They'd moved that off to Cleveland last year in the Travis Hunter trade. But they had 10 total picks and 4 on day 2. Their needs for the draft, their major needs, a linebacker, a defensive tackle, a running back, and a safety. Let's move through those. Running back. Look, Bashal Tootin came in last year, had 7 touchdowns, and is a solid running back. Is he running back 1 material? Don't think he is. They brought in Chris Rodriguez there. Again, he's not running back 1 sort of quality. It's a 2 at best. You've lost Travis Etienne to the Saints, and you've had 10 picks to go and grab a running back, and you haven't. So, glaring issues there straight off the bat. What are you doing? As an organisation, it's clearly one of your biggest needs, and you're not filling that at all. Are you going to go and grab someone out of free agency? Obviously, you've got a few months to do that, but I would have liked to see a little bit more action there from Jacksonville. There, linebacker. You've lost Devin Lloyd to the Panthers. He was their best defender, without a doubt. And then your depth there at the position isn't great. It's not incredible. You've got players there that fill spots, but at the end of the day, it's not one of your strengths. So what was your answer to that? Go and get Parker Hughes from Middle Tennessee at pick 240. He didn't get an invite to the combine. He ran a 4.39 in his pro day. He's a special teams guy at best. At best, unfortunately, I'll say it. But with your second round pick, you've gone and got a tight end out of Texas A&M, Nate Boerkircher. He's had 19 career catches. 19. What are you doing there at pick 56, getting a tight end that's caught the ball 19 times in his college career? Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon, the guard at 88. Great talent. Late first, early second round pick. So you've got a steal there. That's the shining light of your draft. But one good pick in 10 when your biggest needs are still sitting there Monday morning is just not good enough there from Jacksonville. So they're going to have to make some real serious moves now to fill gaps that they certainly did not there over the weekend. Second team that is a non-improver for me is the Atlanta Falcons. Again, a team with no first-round pick. You traded the Rams last year to move up to grab James Pierce Jr. Obviously, Pierce had a great rookie season, Defensive Rookie of the Year finalist, but then obviously all the off-field issues that he's currently going through, there's concern there that maybe there's issues, maybe the league suspends him, and then you've used a first-round pick there last year and lost this year. So obviously you've started the year with a fresh start. You've brought in Stefanski. You've got a new GM. You've got Matt Ryan there as your the president of football. You brought in Tua, which I think is a really good decision. I think he can go. He stays healthy. I think he has a lot to give the guys there in Atlanta. If Michael Penix is not going to be ready to go until sort of mid-year, it gives them sort of options there in Atlanta. But again, Atlanta only had 6 picks this draft. So your major needs: wide receiver, offensive tackle, defensive line, the cornerback and linebacker positions. The cool pick and loving story of the draft, obviously they've gone and got Avion Terrell there from Clemson, which is AJ Terrell's younger brother. That's just a cool story. Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver out of Georgia, 4.35, 40, a real weapon there on the outside, good pickup. But then you haven't addressed the offensive tackle until round 7. There hasn't been answers. There's still a lot of questions around where this organisation is sort of heading, especially with what is happening with Penix. And is he going to be the guy moving forward? Much similar to another team that I see is a non-improver from this draft with an issue with who they thought was going to be their franchise quarterback, and that is the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, you've moved on from both interior defensive linemen to save cap, and that's big losses up front. You've signed Kyler Murray from the Cardinals. Really like that move. Again, similar to the Tua situation there in Atlanta. You've brought in someone to compete for the starting job against a quarterback that you thought was going to be your franchise quarterback, and it simply sort of hasn't worked out that way yet. Am I writing off JJ? Am I writing off Penix? Not yet, but there's still a lot to see. Penix obviously coming off ACL. JJ just not being who Minnesota thought he was going to be. Again, some cause for concern, but I think bringing in a guy like Kyler to sort of give him a little bit of boost and make him really want to sort of aim to be quarterback one, not sort of just being given keys to the city, as you will. Now, safety obviously was a big need for the Vikings. Dylan Thieneman from Oregon was pretty much everyone's consensus pick there for the Vikings, and they sort of just didn't do that. They went with Caleb Banks out of Florida, the defensive tackle. Now, picking up a guy on the line of scrimmage that is 300 pounds and has got foot issues is always a major concern, because it's so hard for these guys to overcome these injuries, because the amount of pressure in such a short space of time, 2,100 pounds of pressure within like 0.2 of a second there on the line, and you're putting it all through your feet. The fact is, he's only played 3 games last year for Florida. You've come to the combine and broken the foot again, and you're not sort of looking to get back on the field until July. Some real big, I just feel like that was a really big reach there from Minnesota to go and grab a guy like Caleb Banks. Look, it could really pay off for them. I think the upside is great for him, but again, the concern of his foot should be a major contributing factor. Obviously, you picked up Jacoby Thomas there from Miami at 98. He sort of partially addresses that position, but when you're getting a guy at 98 in comparison to a guy that you could have got at 18, they're just apples and oranges. Look, you didn't get worse. You gifted a divisional rival, a future star there in Thieneman, to the Chicago Bears that you need to play twice a year. Yeah, they just didn't do enough for me. And finally, the last sort of team on my list of non-improvers, unfortunately, is the Arizona Cardinals. Look, full reset there in Arizona. You've moved off Kyler. You brought in Mike LaFleur as your new head coach. You've obviously got Gardner Minshew and Jacoby Brissett as your veteran quarterbacks to fight for the job. But then you've also gone and grabbed a guy like Carson Beck, who I think, look, he had a pretty solid college career, obviously getting Miami through to a national championship last season. You've also brought in Tyler Algier from the Falcons, who obviously was the competition for Bijan Robinson. Now you've brought him over after then going and getting a guy like Jeremiah Love at number 3. There's always concern about taking a running back that high. Can Jeremiah Love be that kind of Saquon Barkley-esque type player? as well as being able to become a receiver. I think he does, but it's yet to be seen, and we will see within the first couple of weeks what kind of production they're going to get out of a guy like Jeremiah Love. You also still haven't filled holes there on the edge. You haven't got another right tackle, and your first defensive pick was Caleb Proctor out of southeastern Louisiana there at pick 104. Look, we'll wait to see what happens there in Arizona, but I'm not convinced that they got any better outside of Jeremiah Love. Now let's move on to the biggest steals of the draft. Got to start with my boy Caleb Downs, getting all the way through out of the top 10, dropping to the Cowboys there at 11. Obviously, the Cowboys moving up from 12, giving Miami the 12th pick, 177th and 180th. The Cowboys needed to get a guy like Downs. He will be an all-pro. I will call it early. He'll be the rookie defensive player of the year, and I think he could also be an all-pro year one. He's that good. 44 college games. He had 257 tackles, 6 interceptions, 12, 3 forced fumbles. Can play safety, the nickel, the box, and the slot. He's an absolute chess piece. Dallas allowed 30.1 points per game last year, the worst in the NFL. The Cowboys have only ever picked up one other safety in the first round, and that was in 2002, and that was Roy the Hitman Williams, who went to 5 consecutive Pro Bowls. So Downs has franchise-altering value there at 11. He should have gone anywhere from second all the way through to where he went there at 11. At 11 is an absolute steal for the Cowboys. Really like that pick, and as a Cowboys fan, very happy with that. So thank you, New York. The next steal of the draft, I think, it's got to be Colton Hood going to 37 to the Giants. I think that is sort of one of the biggest slips. He should have absolutely gone for first round. He could have gone sort of anywhere there, probably sort of 18th onwards. He barely allows completions despite only having 3 interceptions in his career, and I think a really, really good pickup for the Giants there at 37. He's long, athletic, and physical. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo, going to the Browns there at pick 58. Again, like I said at the top of the episode, Browns had one of the best drafts. So for a player that was ranked by the Don Mel Kiper as 33rd ranked player in the draft to slip all the way down to 58. Look, obviously not coming from one of the Power 4 schools, coming from the Middle American Conference. There's always a bit of concern there. Is he up to NFL standard, having not played against Power 4 teams? But 10 forced fumbles and 5 interceptions in college, I think, translates to having a pretty solid career in the pros. And Cleveland just kept finding value all weekend, which is really good to see. I'm really happy for Cleveland, so shout out Browns. And then one that I've also already previously spoken about is Jermod McCoy. Look, the concern is there, that's why he dropped, but the upside is incredibly high. He'll be a starting cornerback for the Raiders if he's healthy, and if that knee doesn't go on him, be happy days. And a really good pickup there for the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's quickly roll through 3 players that I think teams may live to maybe potentially regret taking at the position that they did. One I've already spoken about, but the first one that I haven't is got to be Ty Simpson there at 13 to the Rams. Now, probably one of the most confusing picks there of the first round, like many people have sort of stated. Look, I get the long-term vision. And like I've said, the Rams are a team that's sort of always going to be around the mark. They're not going to drop off completely to a point where they're completely rebuilding. The fact that they only lost the NFC Championship game to the Seahawks 31-27 and missing out on a Super Bowl by 4 points, you are there. You're in that window. You've got maybe 1, maybe 2 years left of Matt Stafford. But the fact that you had players like Monroe Freeling, Blake Miller, and Mekhi Lemon all go within the next 7 picks of Ty there at 13, players that can help you win now, to pick up a player that probably won't start for 2 years if Stafford stays and doesn't retire, and McVay has already come out and said pretty much straight away that this is still Matt Stafford's team, then is there cause for concern that maybe you could have gone and picked up someone next year and hopefully maybe brought in a guy as a bridge next year to get you through, to keep you competitive and to allow you to grab a guy next year that is going to be maybe a little bit higher on people's draft boards than Ty Simpson was, simply due to the fact that he only had 15 career starts there in college. Caleb Banks, we've already spoken about him. The foot issue is a real concern for a guy on the line. It'll go one of two ways. Either he will be an absolute stud and everyone will be like, great decision there by the Vikings, or they will come to regret it because he's starting his career injured. And like I've said, big guy, foot injury, always an issue. And the other player that we actually haven't spoken about, who again, injury-riddled career, some serious concern about his ability to stay healthy, is Jordan Tyson. If it pays off, he's wide receiver 1 at the Saints. I think he takes over from Olave, but having Olave there and Jordan Tyson as your two weapons for Tyler Shoff, if he's going to be a guy moving forward, is incredible. Hopefully we can see from his private workout that he did, and he's over his injuries and he can have a fruitful career in the pros. Now, with the draft coming to an end, obviously we need to relook at sort of standings there in the Sunday Standard Power Index. We won't go through all of the teams because we'll be here for another 45 minutes, an hour. And I don't want to bore you guys, so I'll throw up another post later on in the week with the movements of teams based on sort of the grade that I give them and if they've filled gaps and needs there in their organisation, but I'll throw that later up in the week. So just quickly, we'll roll through the risers of the Sunday Standard Power Index. It's got to be the Raiders. Mendoza makes you better from day one. You've already, like I said, brought in Kirk Cousins. He, again, it's an upgrade from Gino. I think they certainly move up a significant amount of spots and actually have direction now with what they're doing. The Browns, again, also had them at worst in the league. I think they move up out of that position, get to sort of maybe a 27, 26 once I've looked at all the data. And then the Jets as well, had them at 31st. I think, again, they also move up. You've had 3 first-round picks and you've nailed each one of them. David Bailey, again, questionable. Maybe Ivell Reese was the better fit, but for right now, David Bailey, you brought in Kenyon Sadiq there at 16, and then you've moved up again. And Omar Cooper Jr., they look like a completely different franchise just with those 3 picks. They will move up. And then, look, the teams that I sort of said as that were non-improvers, the Vikings, the Jags, and the Falcons. Obviously, not a major factor being the Jags and the Falcons just simply not having a first-round pick, so they're not getting the cream of the crop there of the draft to improve significantly. The Vikings obviously passing on Thieneman, getting a pre-injured player like Caleb Banks and then allowing him to walk to a divisional rival. I think they potentially dropped down a little bit in rankings. But again, how much I will have to go through that during the week when I get some time and sort of come back to you guys with where everything sort of sits there once the dust settles. Finally, sort of big picture takeaways that I've gotten from the draft. I think teams are thinking further ahead than we sort of give them credit for. Obviously, the Rams going and getting a guy like Ty Simpson from Alabama. They are planning for the future. The Jets have actually made some really smart moves this offseason, bringing in players to really look towards next year. And then hopefully come 28, 29, we can see that organisation come from the rubble that they have been in for the last 10, more of a competitive organisation, which they haven't yet to show over that time. Another major takeaway from this draft was that injury risk is being priced completely different nowadays. Obviously, with the moves in medicine and surgeries and the ability to come back better than you once were from sort of major injuries like ACLs and stuff has come leaps and bounds in the last 20 years. You're not out for a definite 12 months with an ACL injury and even potentially longer, you can be back in the gym a lot quicker, building strength up, and again, becoming as good, if not better, there physically to continue your career. So for players that are coming out of college to move to the pros, I think teams are now looking at that a little bit differently, where they can sort of maybe take a risk. Obviously, a lot of players still, you look at longevity of their career and take all that into account based on the injury. And if it's going to be a contributing factor down the road, then obviously players like that fall, similar to sort of what we saw there in Jermod McCoy out of Tennessee, falling all the way to first. I think there's always going to be major concern. But then you look at guys like Jordan Tyson, who have great upside but have been injury prone for their career, but go pick 8. So I guess it all depends sort of where teams stand on the fence with how they can deal with these injuries as they come along. And finally, one of the major takeaways from this draft, that drafts are always won in the second and third round. Round 1 tells you a direction of the franchise, but rounds 2 and 3 shows me that an organisation and a front office really understands of what sort of direction they want to go as a franchise. And I think we saw a lot of teams show their cards and where they're heading, and then a lot of teams sort of shy away from really making some moves there in round 2 and 3 to continue their trajectory of being a team that can potentially fight to be in those late days in January, if not the major day there in February. So that's it. The draft is done. The grades are in from Kuiper and all the other big guys, but I will bring my draft grades through to you during the week. So this is where the real work starts. These guys are coming into their new buildings, into their new jobs, they're meeting their locker rooms, they're getting themselves situated in their new cities. But by week 4 of this season, we will either know that the teams have won or lost in this draft. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you. New episodes every week, 6 p.m. Monday. See you then.